Welcome to the SJ Childs Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, and thanks for joining the SJ Childs Show today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to really diving deep into the science, neuroscience, and just to talk about how the brain relates to, well, in my case, it will be children and learning and how we need to really understand so that we can give them the best opportunities. And we do that through education. So without further ado, I have Dr. Christopher Slaton with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this fascinating conversation. And it might be just me and my autistic outside the box thinking brain. So I'll let you decide how it goes from there and just see how I match up there. But, I've really always in my life had this fascination with our bodies and our brains and how we can best dive deep to discover how we can help ourselves. And then in parenting, it turns out how we can help these little people that we're raising. And better understanding them starts with sometimes understanding their brains and where that starts. So I like to dive deep into that conversation. Give us an introduction about yourself and a little bit about what brought you here today.
So I'm Dr. Christopher Kevin Slaton, and I've been interested in the brain since early in my young childhood development, because there was always something else that led me to believe that I wasn't just smart because that there was something inside me that helped me to move through contact interaction in difficult situations where I've always related to having character as I got older, because it turned out that I was making the proper decisions. So I delved into it. And as I became an adult and I began to interact with children and families in crises, I then leaned towards further trying to understand the brain, because parents and children in crises have a difficulty moving through interaction because their sense and receive paths may be damaged by the effect of the crises they're moving through. And when you interact with them, you may not realize that they rely on you to help them understand you. And so that's the brain, because the brain's a social organ. And I came to understand that through all the interviews I went through here in California with Department of Mental Health, state agencies, just an array of interviewing people, just talking about the brain to understand how to deliver services to these children and families that were in crises. I also was involved in substance abuse-related disorders with children, and then parents who were abandoned or neglected because of the parents' abuse of drugs. So that really got me really involved. And so I developed this concept. It's an approach, human system science. And so when you talk about children and you talk about how to help them, the first step, I believe, is the breath of life and understanding how that transpired, because that's their engagement of contact at level 1. And I had to understand that, because here you get a kid that's 12 and you have to figure out what's going on with them amongst all these other things that could be inside their lives. And the best way for me to do that was to look at the breath of life experience and understanding how that contact occurred, and then relate that contact to the home and what I'm currently experiencing with that child and that parent, to get a better understanding of how they move through school, where the interaction becomes more abstract because of academic. And for a parent who's in crises, they don't need to go through that trying to learn how to understand academics as a communication voice when they're dealing with a social problem inside the home where their kid is not making the contact and the interaction that's required for them to fully participate. So see, when we talk about children, the first step is to understand how they make contact and how you can help them learn to interact socially. So when they move to school, you're practicing the contact and the interaction, because the next thing you want to see is the cooperation. But when a kid's upset, how do they know to cooperate? How can they feel their way to cooperate? So in working with children, I've learned you don't ignore the basic principles of life and learning. So I always start with talking about contact and then talking about interaction and then looking at cooperation. Because when you deal with the crises, you're dealing with emotion and thought in the sense and receive path. And what you're trying to do is process that, get the kid to process that. So you take the contact and you're actually teaching the kid the contact, how to move through mom. You're telling mom how to move through the kid or the child. Now you could begin a dialogue teaching them about the brain, how it experiences the contact as interaction that then is the mixing of emotion and thought. So now you got them understanding why you want them to practice making contact at home, interacting at home with the family, and be able to assess and evaluate what the responses are. Because now you can help improve that child's sense of receive path. So when they get to school and you're trying to tell them to interact through the uncomfortable feelings of academics where they're being graded and the grades may not work with their sense of feel for self, you can help them move through that by understanding we just got to modify the way we interact. Okay, so it's a language system that you want to have when you work with children. So teach them social academics, how to move from the land-based, disorganized elements of education to the formal elements of education, but it's a practice that they're already involved in. So when they get to the abstract learning, it's easier for a teacher to interact with them through because that's their base as well. So it's a language system that I work through.
I love that. It's so important too. And it's empowering when we give the kids the abilities to let us follow their lead, essentially. And really, like you said, kind of learn how that contact process starts. I love that you said that. I don't think that's something that is identified or has a hot button enough, in topics, is really going back to that connection and that contact piece. What do you say is a good start for maybe parents who wouldn't understand how to try to make that contact or connection or seek that out? What's a good stepping stone for them?
The first step with parents is self, because self-contact and working with a child and trying to lead a child to allow them to help them, they got to look within their sense of feel for self, and that's contact with their own brain, because they got to rationally understand, okay, how do I fit into this equation? You got to get them through that part first so that they don't feel that they're under attack, that they are being asked to look within themselves and understand their experiences and relate those to the child so that the child doesn't think, wow, something's wrong with them. No, something's wrong with us because the contact interaction came through them. Okay? Whether the child was in the womb or shortly after, whatever the parent was doing is part of that child's sense and receive path system. So we call it the matrix. So yes, I would tell the parent, because the contact is critical. Because the contact is information flow. Contact is what the information elements move through when you talk about sense and receive path functioning. And then the interaction, right? That is the actual brain changing and converting that energy, action, and feelings so that they both can then make that third step, choose to cooperate. So you got to act, you have to approach the parent and let them know, like you were saying, they have a choice to choose to allow the information to be made available to really help the kid. So when you're talking to help the kid, the parent is on board because they're listening. You're not attacking. Instead, you're leading them to help you help the child with them in the lead.
Mm.
And that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. It all begins with you as a parent, as a person, an individual. And sometimes, we're deep into parenting years and years or whatever before sometimes we have that realization. And that's okay too. It's okay wherever you're at on your journey. It's whether you're willing to start or continue is the truth about it and your intentions behind that. So it's okay if you're just listening to this today and you think, oh my gosh, how do I now look, at what I'm doing and what kind of changes do I make? And there's a lot of actions you can take personally, introspectively to start to make those changes to be a more active listener and to make more connections. And I love that the information flow because that is so true. And that's the key to continuing to foster and nurturing this relationship with this person that you want to have their own individual access to their self-confidence, to their self-empowerment. And we need to give them those tools to build those things within themselves through their experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why it's critical when you talk about the brain, you talk about learning or learn because you want the brain in the front. You want the child to realize they have a brain. You don't want a child to grow up going through these experiences and not realizing what's inside of them that helps them wake up, move, do all the things they're doing, and that they can help by understanding how to learn who they are from the inside to the outside.
Mm.
So you want that word learn at the front, and you want that word learning at the front because you can relate it to the brain. And as you move through these environments, home, school, neighborhood, and workplace, you're actually helping the child through the developmental stages of life towards adulthood, understanding these interactions. Kids get in trouble in the neighborhood, but you're teaching the child how to study the neighborhood, to expand their sense of feel for self in relation to their brain, and then sense and receive past functions. That's a language system that really, um, really improves through the awareness of the sense and receive functions.
Yeah. How can we then, once we've kind of stepped into our parent, letting our ego go and our control and really realizing the important, you know, uh, I guess job that a parent needs to have and to do is to instill these skills because we're creating future adults and we want them to be members of society that can, create or have relationships. So what happens when we are in the moment of disarray and crisis and that piece? What are some steps we can take to maybe calm the situation, or what are some advice that you might give to parents to help disengage in somebody that's having a crisis and helping them understand that brain process?
First thing is breathe.
Mm.
Breathe. Why? Because when you breathe, there's a pause between your sense of feel for self and the next step, and you're trying to catch up. See, so if you have a reaction, right, or if you've already responded, you're trying to catch up. And so I would say that's the first step is to breathe. And when you breathe, remember those words, emotion is natural,
Mm.
right? As is too much thinking. And that's your conflict. That's why you want to breathe, because you want that emotion to be realized, but in the same sense of thinking, because that could be the problem in the sense and receive path is that you have this conflict going on between feelings of emotion and feelings of thought. And you want to understand how the brain uses the sense and receive path to mitigate the actual effects of the situation that you're moving through, but there are things that the parent has to understand. I understand what emotion is, right? So, what is emotion? No, you know what emotion is. It's an effect on what? Your brain. And so, when you look at the interaction piece, if it's not clear to you, then your thinking is confused as well. Why? Because you're trying to transfer to another step to react or to respond, but you got to slow down the flow of energy, action, and feeling long enough, right, for reflection to kick in.
Mm.
Because that's what the parent does have is experience.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to work from. That's why you want to know what emotion is, understand what your thinking is like, because you got that choice to make. Is that the way I want to respond? See, it's a methodology, but we all as human beings have this capacity to understand. But what I'm talking about as a human learning consultant is the words.
Mm.
You counteract because that's what the brain does. It transfers those basic words to your the helper, help, that's you system. You have self help, self research, self discovery to get through the crises. So
Mm.
you're constantly looking within yourself to understand your experience in relation to sense and receive path functions, because it's two things. Either you overwhelmed by the emotion or you're overthinking it and you want a balance.
Mm.
That's reflection. Because in reflection is the old and the new. It's
Mm.
a mixing,
Mhm.
right, of emotion and thought. But in the sense of new, because your brain's responding to the situation that you're in. But if you don't cooperate and you just react, then it stays in the sense path and you are in crises.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love that you said breathe too, because that's something everyone can just simply do. And they need to really access that simple tool to just realize that that flow of oxygen to the brain, the breathing, the effect that it has somatically on your body to help calm the responses and the reflexes and the nervous system is so valuable. I mentioned that, I have a family of autistics, and our son has more challenging support needs than the others in the family. And something that we learned early on was that impulse and that reaction that was hard for him to have the control over. And right away we learned and found out that this breathing technique we could use, and not even that he would be using it, that we would use, so that he would start to model that behavior. And it has been, he's 13 now, and I think we started that when he was 5 or 6. And now today, if he freaks out about losing, he gets upset when he misses alarms on his phone. So if he misses his alarm and I hear him in a hectic manner, then I go into his room, I, either say, take a deep breath, or I just simply start breathing myself and take nice, calm breaths. And he starts doing the same right away. What a blessing it has been to have him have this skill. Otherwise, it would have looked like before the skill, self harm. And that's just not, appropriate behavior in life. So we don't want that. And so it's so important that we teach these skills. So brilliant that you said that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so important. Now, what kind of access do families have? Do you do like online or in person work with them? What does that look like?
Online right now, since the pandemic, yeah, we because we had to close down too.
Yeah.
Yes, we do everything primarily using Zoom. Yes, and we have a website coming up later on this month,
Oh, great.
brainsbody.net. Yes. So yeah, because what you understand is that we're talking about the brain, and as long as you understand that the brain has a learning system, you can still deliver effective services because what you're talking about is how you practiced with your child or how the family learned to practice.
Mhm.
And that's what you're talking about with education. Education in the 21st century is virtual.
Mm,
How they want to
yeah.
try to keep it land based, they're losing that struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see, you can't program the brain. You can't program a child with autism.
Mm,
They are who they are, and they must learn from where they are how to move through themselves and the world. And the
yeah.
world has to make the adjustment. And it's
Yes.
easier when you know you have to make the adjustment virtually for that child to get the resource or the approaches that are required for them to be understood, because you have to be careful and caring in order for him or her to accept your information.
Mm-hmm.
Virtual delivery systems make, I think, the necessary adjustment, especially for children who have difficulties moving through contact interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to see and feel the care on the front, because they're saying no one's going to hurt me any further, because people misunderstand when the child is different and
Yeah.
they know it, and it makes them feel so uncomfortable that they have to have a defense. Otherwise, how do they continue to get up and keep recovering from the fact that they are at a disadvantage? And how do they recover if they don't gain the advantage from the environment or other people, realizing they must show care when they
Mm-hmm.
approach them and try to move through them? And don't disrespect them thinking they're less than. Just understand that you are supposed to do what you expect them to do for you, so you care.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. Cares.
the three things I'll add is this: working with children, you know, be cool. No, we got to behave. Be cool. Be cool.
Mm,
No, be
I love
calm
that.
down. No, these are the three things. Be cool. Calm down now. Collect yourself. See, it's not that bad. You're still in the league, but you got to remember those three things, because other people may know.
Yeah.
All you want to know is that you're working, that your brain is working. So one, two, three. I'm saying what you were saying. You were saying the same words. I'm just saying that's a process cycle
Mm,
that you want children to practice. That's all I'm
I
saying.
love it. I love the three C's. Couldn't be any better. Stay cool, calm, collected. I love that. I think that that's fantastic. And those are easy steps. They're tangible steps for parents to take to try to, help your child overcome and redirect in moments where we need them to um we want them to understand the feelings that they're having can get processed. I think that that's what it is. And I think in the past, a lot of, and you may agree or not on, there's been this, don't look at your feelings, dismiss your feelings, put away those feelings. Now we want to say, let's look at those, let's process and get and help us really discover the roots of those emotions so that we can process through them and not have to act accordingly every time, right?
Yes, yes. But that's the hardest thing. You're right on top of it because that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
It's natural.
Yeah.
You can't ignore feelings because you have a feeling system. You're a human being. You can try to ignore the fact that you got feelings, and what happens to you? You burn up from the inside out.
That is so true.
It's associating yourself with contact interaction, saying it's not real. So the approach then is learn those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain is now in the lead, handling that emotion. And even if you don't realize it, you set the brain up so that you can become more aware through the experience of it, how to make the changes associatively with those situations that you're talking through.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, again, I always say you want to learn and understand learning as the experience or the object, because the goal is to learn the feelings, the brain, the body, the senses, you see. And so when you're dealing with children and you use these simple words, be cool. It resonates with their brain. Wait, calm down. It resonates with their brain. Wait, quiet. It resonates with their brain, and you can play with them. I mean, they're excited. They're in a mood state, and you're using words, and you can smile at them and say, "Wait, I'm working with you. I'm right here. We're working together. Let's stick it out." So you can play with it, and they begin to respond because they can feel your care. Even if a child can't feel you, like you said, they're modeling what you show.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're there smiling and you're working with them, the translation is there. All you want to do now, can you act with me through the crises?
Yeah.
Okay? Because when they do, whether they recognize it or not, the brain lights up. Okay? Because they're performing. And that's Foucault, a psychiatrist. So no, I've been practicing his stuff since I read his book back in the early 90s. And I practiced it. It worked. It really works.
Yeah. I love that you said that. I agree completely. Our phrase that we use with our son is from the movie Bowfinger of the 90s. It was this phrase just always stuck in my head. Keep it together. Keep it together. KIT, keep it together. Keep it together. I don't know if you ever saw that in the actor's character's name was Kit, and he would have to say to his psychiatrist, keep it together, KIT, keep it together. And so I do that with my son, and I help, we kind of work on that, keep it together. And he takes his breath. So that's our 3-word action. So yeah, I love it. When you have a system in place, like you said, number one, learn it. Always constantly, you're going to have to keep transitioning and changing. That's just a constant, isn't it? So be flexible in your ways of maybe pivoting that motion or actions and movements when your child is growing, and learning how to keep communicating whatever level they're at.
Yes, because you're absolutely right, because you said it, you want to grow your child. Even when it's hard, you understand what that means when you can find joy in the process of working with them. Now, my son has schizophrenia, so a lot of my work came through him, and the things I had to do, I had to change me because he was not the problem.
Yeah.
It was me who had to understand him, and I had to change. Like you said, I had to change. And when I began to change, he began to sense and receive and process even better and grow through the crises where the predictions was he wasn't going to be able to do those types of things, but he was able to continue to work from the inside out. And we use contract where I said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm asking you to do. And if either one of us break the contract, then we come back to the table and negotiate all over. But he understood the pros and cons because as parents, you know all the things you and your child are going through. So when you set up a contract, kid knows the disadvantages of coming back to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So you want that child to enjoy growth cycles, and that's the agreement because they can learn how to move through their own sense of feel for self, which is in the way. So you want to help them get out of their own way.
Yes,
So they can
yes.
accept. Yeah, you see?
Yeah, for
So they can
definitely.
accept. Yeah, accept the help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and it's so important that, like you said, in really changing ourselves and letting them see. It was so interesting. I just had this conversation with my husband this morning because I'm the wear my heart on my sleeve, kind of the softie of the family. My husband's, this the autistic, very self introspective, and people would say antisocial, but I think it's great. I'm the loud one, he's the quiet one. Our daughter is much more like her dad than she is like me. And sometimes I feel like the way I'm teaching her and the way I move through the world is so vastly different. But, and I said to him this morning, I hope that, I'm making the right decisions and I'm doing. And he said, she absolutely needs the role of this loving, warm mother. Like, if she didn't have that, she would just be like this tough, tough cookie that would not understand. He jokingly said, we'd be stabbing people everywhere, which of course would never happen. But, in his mind, like his sense of not really wanting to be, outward with the world as much as I do. And so I love that. It kind of brought me back to that understanding that we all have different pieces of values that, and, obviously we're in our own household. Every other household is different, and individuals who ever raise children, have their own individual selves. But for me, that it was validating to hear she needs that part as well. She doesn't, even though she's like this tough cookie and I could never be like that, she needs that softness to kind of balance out that part.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mixing the personalities is great. Yes. Yeah, definitely. That's why I talk. I don't try to label it. I just call it your sense of feel for self. See, let your actual experiences define that,
Yeah.
but your sense of feel for self. So then you're learning from the contact interaction from self, other people, and the environment, which is inclusive of everything.
Yeah.
Right? So you become, but the key is just understanding that you have these choices at every stage that
Yeah.
you have to make, and you want to become better at it. And so when you teach the child about their sense and receive path functions, all you're trying to get them to understand is this is how you make choices and decisions for the rest of your life. It's going to always be difficult, but you have to know how to cooperate and when to cooperate because sometimes you can't cooperate, and that's okay. And that's what you want to learn. You
Yeah.
want to learn how to cooperate. So when you don't cooperate, that backward feed kicks in and you realize, well, I made a good decision because I can recall the last time I tried that. So you can rationally understand how you're growing and evolving into those next stages. So I agree, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we live in a very difficult system, and you can't just be open. some of us have to be tough
Mm.
because we carry our own experiences, but that doesn't mean we're closed. It means that this is our approach to handling that contact interaction so that these things kick in, and that's why I'm successful. You see what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. Like you're saying, it's very difficult making those choices. So I don't label it. I just talk through the sense of feel for self and the brain, and
Yeah.
I say the lead of the body.
Yeah.
Because the brain has to be in the lead of the body because you're trying to change a negative behavior. And if you want to change a negative behavior, then the brain has to recognize in the functional role of managing, controlling, and processing brain, body, and sense events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like I taught myself a little trick about, a decade ago after I'd raised a stepdaughter and took a lot of old parenting styles that I was raised with, and that's all I knew, right? And we bring them to the table with us. And sometimes it's not a good approach. And we learn that in our next parenting adventure that the same style of parenting is not going to work, and we have to check ourselves at the door and start on a fresh note. And there was a moment for me where I realized that the communication that I had been passed down to me in yelling was not going to be helpful in my relationships and my children trust building relationships. And I wasn't sure how to curb or how, like, what step do I take? How do you go from one day, you know, communicating in that sense to stopping it? And I decided to give myself a little trick where every time I wanted to yell out, I would yell, I want to yell right now. So my body was responding in the response that I wanted to yell, but I wasn't projecting it out to anyone. And it was no longer affecting the situation. And soon enough, not very long after it started to sound so silly that I was yelling, I want to yell right now, that I really just stopped. And it's been about a decade now. And I kind of joke that sometimes the dogs get yelled at, but, otherwise, but the kids and it's never been a problem between me and my husband. But it was definitely um, a learned behavior that it was it was subconscious. It was something that I hadn't even recognized as like a bad behavior. But when it stopped, I surely recognized the damage and the piece that was going to be in front of me and the damage I had to clean up in the back. So
Yeah.
but it's great that our brains can change. We can change. And it's that decision, that choice making to decide, to do those changes to make things happen.
That's the most but that is the most complex part because the choice box is so difficult. And I'll add to that human systems research in my interpretation of what you just now expressed, which is study of self, other people, and the environment. Because when you have that conflict going on inside between emotion and thinking, that study of self, but it's in relation to other people. So you're grounded, so you don't become self-centered because you're relating your sense of feel for self and the brain in relation to other people. So you're studying their brain too. So then you have reflection because you can see them as you're interacting with them and get instant feedback and then apply it to the environment, which is the situation where it's unfolding, and go to another level of trying to understand and appreciate the value of what you're expressing, moving through to change how you experience self. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's to me my interpretation of what you just now were talking about. Yes, that's how I would look at it.
I love that. I have really enjoyed this conversation with you today. And before we go, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to be able to find you and find out more about you, contact you if they are in need of something that will help them create a better parenting system, sense of self, sense of emotional understanding, and understanding your brain's power and helping your child understand it as well. Where can we go to find you and connect with you?
Um, I would say start at Amazon. I have an author page there. I'm an author of Education and Science, The Brain's Body, Help to Improve Brain Body and Sense Events. I have a website, Dr. Christopher K Slaton.com. I have another website on the Brains Body Learning System that's coming up later this month. That's brainsbody.net. And then I have my regular email that you can contact me at. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, and all the others, but
Great.
I prefer the email because then we can develop a relationship,
Yeah.
dialogue even, and I can further point you in directions that you may want to go in. Yes, so that would be brainsbody at AOL.com.
Oh, fantastic. AOL. I didn't even know they still existed.
Yeah, yeah,
That's fantastic.
absolutely.
Oh, wow. It's been such a pleasure to meet you and to speak with you today. I really enjoyed our conversation. So I hope we can stay in touch.
I hope so too. I would love to.
Yeah, I would love to.
Because you were very exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
you were really a good leader. I mean, you were
Oh,
leading, and I was understanding. Like I said, I'm gonna follow you, and you were just awesome.
thank you
For
so
real,
much. Oh, I
it's so
appreciate
easy.
that. I love that. Well, and I am, like I said, fascinated with all things brain. And once I discovered, well, I always have been, but then when my son was diagnosed, it really I delved deep into proteins and brains and enzymes. And I went really deep into
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
and it made a big difference. And I hope it's helped and improve not only my family's life, but countless numbers of listeners and viewers that get to enjoy these amazing conversations that I have. So thank you so much.
And thank you very much as well, sir.
And
I really enjoyed it, and I hope the same thing that you're hoping that the audience received a reasonable share of the information that helps them make the improvements they want to make, so that they can reduce any negative effects that they're going through at this time.
love that. Thank you so, so much. Well, I look forward to staying in touch and